We also have something, we have colleges and universities that come here to the high school to meet with seniors. Last year we had close to 70 that actually come in and talk to seniors in small groups. And so this is the list as of today. Guys, can you lower the mic just a little? I'm getting a little feedback. So this is the list as of today. We do have colleges that continue to add as the semester goes on. And we start this in early October, and we finish up usually late November. Last year we tried something new for Burlington High School anyway. We opened up college visits last spring to the current seniors who would have been juniors last year. And so we really hope to have a little bit more of a turnout last spring, but we did have students that participated and attended some college visits at the high school. We probably had not as many colleges are interested in coming in the spring. We probably had more like 20, I would say. So it was a good option for juniors, again, now seniors, and we do plan to continue that if you have younger children in the school. We have two little helpful sheets about support, mental health support and also academic support. You're going to hear about SCORE. We have a sign-up sheet. I would suggest you fill that out so you can have access to SCORE. You'll hear more about that in the presentation. We have a helpful senior to-do list. I know I like timelines and check boxes and all that stuff, so you can actually use that as a guide, for tracking senior year, the steps that students need to take. So we have a helpful guide for that. Frequently asked questions. And then we do have a breakfast series. I know I've seen some parents here at some of our breakfasts over the years. We have that listed. We're adding a new breakfast about dual enrollment this year, which is in October. But we have all the different breakfast topics listed. And then lastly, we have an evaluation. So for those that are here, before you leave, even if you sneak out a little early, we won't be upset. But either way, if you could just fill this evaluation out for us, that just kind of talks a little bit about ways we can improve the presentation. All right. So I'm just going to jump right in. Again, you've made it to senior year, and I'm glad to see a couple of seniors here, but I always like to just make sure we list our staff. We have two staff members that are here, Stephanie Diozzi and Molly Leary. Again, they'll be speaking in a few minutes. You will get to know our registrar, Mrs. Teresa Kavanaugh. She handles all the transcripts. So again, you'll be hearing more about transcripts if you don't already know what they are, but she handles that. And last year we processed quite a few transcripts. And again, you'll hear more about the common application, but that is really the past 5 or 6 years, our applications that we've submitted out of our office have tripled. So we do send out a lot of applications. It is all digitally. It is all a digital submission, but nonetheless, we're still responsible to make sure the colleges receive them. All right, so we're going to jump right in. We're going to start with Ms. Diozzi.
Hello. So we went over a lot of this last spring with students, but for a lot of them it doesn't become reality till they start to see those deadlines and we move into senior year. So all students should have a current list of colleges and they should be finalizing that list. I really like it when students come to see me and they have a long list of students they're following and then they say, oh no, that's not my list. I have narrowed it down and they've made it far more manageable. I'm going to talk about realistic target and safety on another slide. They should choose an admission option, regular decision, early action. And they should also be communicating with us and their recommenders about when their first deadline is and what they're going to need from us. So in the fall, a lot of students still visit colleges. There are virtual tours, information sessions, and guided tours and open houses. Open houses tend to be more for a specific field. Like often you'll see like UMass Lowell will have an open house for engineering students. So it tends to be major specific. Again, Mr. Adebato recommended the college rep visits, which a lot of seniors have been coming to. And then there are a lot of college fair options, so feel free to review those in the handout and see if one works for you. We do recommend that students go to college fairs with a list, because they're often in alphabetical order, but they're also very crowded. And also, if you have younger kids, especially 9th and 10th graders, it's a great opportunity for them to just start thinking about the process. Demonstrated interest is when you show a college that you're really interested in going there. So the more you visit, if you go on a visit with the admissions office, some kids go onto campuses, and that's great. They walk around, they go to a sporting event, but they really need to register with admissions. Holy Cross is probably the most notorious, if I can use that word, for tracking students' interest. It's in the college's best interest when they admit students to have the largest number of students show up to their campus. So they like to try to read your mind and see if you will actually show up if they invite you. And by demonstrating your interest, you can show them that. And also, if you can't get to a campus, like if it's in California, you can demonstrate your interest by engaging online, and then visiting with a rep or emailing the admissions office or even current students. So reach, realistic, and safety. We also use the term target. A reach school is a school for whom it's going to be more difficult to get into. So that means that their average admitted GPA is higher than the student's GPA. And then, of course, there are some colleges like Harvard and Dartmouth and Yale that, even if you're first in the class, that doesn't guarantee you admission. A realistic or target school is usually a school where the odds look good. If a student looks at their scattergram, which is the graph of admissions information we have in the SCORE program, they can see where they stack up mathematically. And then a safety school is a college for which your stats exceed the average admitted student stats. The safety school, I can't emphasize this enough, should not be a throwaway school. It should be a school you really want to go to. Ironically, sometimes the safety school is the one that gives you the most money because they want to recruit students to their honors program or recruit a student with your stats. And then a financial safety school is one that you know that your family can swing no matter what, payment-wise. So we often encourage students to pick at least one state college or university because they're still one of the best bargains around. So these are the admissions deadlines, and you've probably been heard about these before. I'm going to actually. Well, I'll start with regular decision. Regular decision is the most common method of admission. I would say probably more nationally. Burlington High kids seem to be applying to a lot more schools early, or they apply to a mix. Regular decision is what we did when we applied to college, most of us. It's a spring of senior year deadline. No matter what deadline you pick, May 1st is the day that you deposit. You cannot be pressured by a college into depositing sooner. The only exception to that is if you need to guarantee housing. Now, early action, I explained to my seniors that early action means early answer. So that's the one where you can apply early and get an answer usually by the 1st of the year. The first deadline for that is usually November 1st, November 15th, and for a bunch of colleges in the South, it's actually October 15th. You can apply to many early action schools, and then for some programs like nursing, almost every college that comes here will say, if you want to be a nurse, you need to apply early action. And then restrictive early action is a tricky kind of admission, and I'm not even sure which schools still. Does BC still do it? It's a very small handful of colleges, but you can only apply to one early action school. So that's a little bit trickier. You still don't have to attend, though. Early decision is the school where you have to attend. So I always say to my students, too, early decision means you've decided to go there. This would be a school that you're really in love with. Statistically, early decision does tend to improve odds of admission. The downside is that even though they'll give you a financial aid package, you will not be able to compare that financial aid package across colleges. So that's where using a financial aid calculator and really trying to estimate how much it will cost can be an important factor in deciding to apply early decision. Rolling admission, schools like Quinnipiac, and some, Penn State, I think, does rolling. So it means they just review the applications as they come in. They don't gather all the data by one date and then start reading 3 weeks later. They just give you an answer as you apply. So these are some samples of REACH colleges. We highlighted Northeastern, and we highlighted UMass Amherst. UMass Amherst is now officially a REACH school for a lot of kids. And Northeastern has gotten very, very competitive over the years. So they have really raised their stats fairly consciously. They've been looking for higher SATs. So this is not meant to bring anybody down, but it is meant to be sort of a reality check so that students can choose a range of colleges that match their GPA and test scores if they're sending them the best. And then last but not least, I just also do want to point out some competitive majors. Again, I mentioned nursing. So you can apply to Salem State College and their admissions rate is pretty high, but their nursing admissions rate is not as high. So the odds are definitely a little lower for any nursing candidate because it's such a competitive program. And speaking of Salem State and UMass, the state university admissions have not really changed since COVID. We weren't sure if they would go back to being requiring SAT scores, but so far they all remain SAT optional, except I think there is some admissions requirements, specific requirements for Mass Maritime and Mass College of Art. Let me see, what do we have here? Yeah, some of them might have a restriction for a major and for merit scholarships. So they might want to see scores, but that really needs to be determined at an individual meeting. A lot of the state colleges are coming to Burlington High. UMass Amherst has already been here. Lowell's coming, I think, on Monday. Framingham State, Worcester State, they all tend to visit, and these are excellent questions for students to ask. They do recalculate GPAs on their end, but a student cannot get admitted with a GPA less than a 2. In some circumstances, a student might be able to submit an SAT score if their PSAT is low, because that higher SAT score might bolster their candidacy. So that's also a question to talk to your counselor about, or to admissions if your GPA is on the lower end, but still over a 2. I've become a huge fan of the mass transfer program. It's called A to B, which means associate's to bachelor's degree. And this is a hard and fast agreement between all of the community colleges and all of the state colleges, where you begin on a specific track in a community college, and then you sort of pledge to continue on that track and transfer into another state college with that major. They do say as spots are available, but so far we don't hear a lot of pushback about spots not being available. So you would go to Middlesex or Bunker Hill or Northern Essex. We always encourage students to shop around for community colleges. Middlesex doesn't have to be the default. And then you see which college you could transfer in the most smoothly. When you commit to that transfer, you do start to get some tuition breaks. So 10% off, and then the Commonwealth commitment is its nickname is ComCom, and they lock in the tuition and fees while you're still in community college. So whatever UMass Amherst cost while you're in community college, that's what it's going to cost you when you get there. One of the new major pieces of the new education law is that if you're a nursing major, the Commonwealth is actively recruiting nurses, so nursing majors can go to community college for free for the next 2 years. So that's a bargain right there. So submitting applications, this is a whole other process, and it's also a process that we really can't talk about with the kids' junior year because they can't really envision it. So We want students to know application requirements and deadlines. I love it when students say to me, oh, Ms. Giozzi, I have a spreadsheet. Can I share it with you? Yes, you may. Know the counseling requirements and deadlines, because we need the information prior to the deadline. We can't all meet on November 1st for a November 1st deadline. We want students to check their email. I've actually found that that's very much improved in my caseload, and to use SCORE. All supporting documents going from Burlington High leave through SCORE. So we send transcripts and letters of recommendations through this computer system, and it goes straight to the college. The teachers upload their letters directly to SCORE once the student requests it, and then we send those. The students can view the scattergrams, which we referred to, which is the graph of admissions data. And I do also want to say a caveat: if a college doesn't have a lot of admissions data, it might not show up on the scattergram, but if it has at least 5 applicants, it will show up on the scattergram. So you can also use SCORE to track application deadlines and scholarship applications. SCORE also forces students to make a commitment about what deadline they're using and whether or not they're submitting SAT or ACT scores. So I love that. As I just said, Burlington High, we send the transcripts, the school profile, the recommendations, and any other supplemental materials that a student might need. Back in the day, we used to help send art portfolios, although a lot of the times now that's just digital. Mrs. Leary's going to get into the nitty-gritty about those particular components of the application. And then the student is responsible by 11:59 p.m. of the deadline, so at November 1st at 11:59 p.m., their application, which includes their supplements and their essays, plus their application fee, has to be submitted. SAT and ACT scores, if the college requires it, students should be sending those now. I totally get that you want to look at your scores before you decide to send them. And for October, I think that's still going to be very possible. But we want you to know that that has to go from you. It can't come from Burlington High. Sometimes colleges ask us to send them, and even if we could, we don't have them anymore in the old-fashioned way that we used to get them. And then other supplemental materials is very rare. The students should just communicate with us if we need to forward a letter or something from an outside party. We can always send that to the college. Students need to do a FERPA waiver. We walk them through this in senior meetings. That's the waiver about agreeing not to see their college letters. We strongly encourage them to waive their right to see their letters. We need them to request a transcript with their counselors, and we want that to be, well, they still have time to do that. And then they are going to submit their application through the Common App and other college websites. We default to the Common App because almost everyone has to use a Common App, but there are colleges like Endicott and Berklee College of Music and MIT that are not on the Common Application. So in that case, you have to go to the website of that college to apply. Oh, okay. So Mrs. Leary's now going to break down the components of the application.
Yes. So the most important piece of the application is the student's transcript. And the transcript is, of course, the student's permanent academic record. What sometimes gets a little confusing about what is included on there, it consists of final grades for grades 9 through 11, so final grades only, and then 12th is where it shifts and is a little bit different. So if students apply for October 15th or November 1st, there are only senior year courses listed on there. There are no grades yet. Our grades are not made official until typically the second week of November. So we submit the transcript that we have for any October 15th or November 1st deadlines, and then as soon as the transcript is updated with Q1 grades, we will submit a new transcript through SCORE electronically to any students that have applied for October 15th or November 1st. For November 15th deadlines, historically, we've always had it updated by then. So it's good to go. And then those grades remain on the transcript until the mid-year. And at the mid-year, which is usually the first week or so of February, that's when we add mid-year averages for students for all of their courses, and that is when we update the GPA. So senior year is the only year where we update the GPA halfway through the year. So prior to that, colleges are getting our GPA as of the end of junior year. And it is, of course, this component of the application is required by all colleges and universities. Just to distinguish between two forms that we have, so you might hear your students talk about a colored slip that they have to turn into their counselors. Counselors are a little bit different in the format of how they ask their students to turn these things in, but historically we've each had a different colored slip, and a lot of us are still using that. So for me personally, it's a pink slip, and that is the pink slip is what is their college application transcript request, essentially, and they're indicating what letters of recommendation to send to each college as well. That is different from needing a copy of your transcript for, say, a scholarship application, or needing it for NCAA, or maybe you're meeting with a coach or going on an interview and you want a copy of your transcript. That is a generic white form that we have available in the counseling office, where students can just fill out the form on the counter, turn it back in the box, and our registrar will have it ready for them to pick up within 24 hours or so. So that is the difference between those two forms. The school profile is something that you will see that is required by colleges, and students honestly don't have to worry about this. We automatically send it with the transcript, and it's just an overview of our school. It helps the colleges distinguish between high schools all across the country, because we're all doing things differently. We calculate our GPA differently. We offer different APs, things like that. We have different statistics for the school, so it's offering all of that information so that admissions reps can fairly compare students across the country. Letters of recommendation, so there's no specific formula, except we do a general rule of thumb. We have always sort of told the students 2 teacher letters and a counselor letter is probably what you should expect. But students might vary in what they end up asking for and needing in the end, depending on the schools they apply to. So it is up to them to, it is tedious, but you do need to double check college websites and see what they require for college letters. For letters of recommendation. So it is up to the student to check that. Letters of recommendation should be another general rule of thumb is you should ask at least a month in advance. So when I met in small groups with my seniors a few weeks ago, I said, if you haven't asked for a letter, that should shoot to the top of your to-do list. Absolutely. At least a month's notice is a good rule of thumb. So letters within the building, they are uploaded directly to SCORE. All of the faculty members in the building have a SCORE account. So you can assume that they will be confidential, that the students won't be able to read them. And then we, the counselors, will submit them through SCORE. Any outside letters that students might get, so that on occasion students do ask someone outside of BHS for a letter. There's a few different ways that we can submit those on their behalf. We have had those recommenders send us digital copies directly to the counselor, and we can upload it to SCORE. Another option is simply to invite those recommenders through the common application. So there are different methods for that, and the student can just check in with us to confirm that. We do recommend sending thank you notes down the road, because people are doing this on their own time. And sometimes, later on down the year, when students are finding out they've been accepted, they can forget that those people helped them along the way. There are some additional forms available through us. We have LOR request forms for teachers and counselors, so we all are a little bit different with our requirements for this. I actually require the parent questionnaire, so if your student is one of my students, then you probably already know that. But those forms can be obtained through the counselor as well. So it's just a matter of touching base with the recommender, finding out what they need from them, and then making sure if they asked for a letter last year that they revisit they reconnect with that person this year and let them know their first deadline. Last year, we had the activity list as an assignment in our Google Classroom last April to get them going. We figured anything we can get done in junior year to help them this year have less on their plate would be helpful. So last year, we had it due in April. We didn't grade it or anything like that. We did give feedback if students wanted feedback. But at this point, as long as they created that activity list, all they have to do now is just update it with senior year activities. Now, the activity list itself may not end up being submitted to colleges, but it is used for a number of reasons. So it can actually help them fill out their activity section on the Common Application. So the activity section of the Common Application only allows 10 activities. And we do tell students to be strategic about what they list there. So at the top, you should be putting what you are most passionate about, what you've been committed to the longest, your favorite activities. Maybe you have a leadership position there. But the activity list that we had them create is helpful to counselors in terms of the letter. It is also helpful for senior year awards, and they will absolutely need it for senior year scholarships, especially if they're applying for those local scholarships in late winter. So it is something that they should be updating, even if they're not necessarily submitting it directly to colleges. The essay is often the last piece that people are working on and copying and pasting into their Common Application. But the prompts were shared with students last spring in our small group meetings when they explored the Common App website. We did urge students to, and it was, for a lot of classes in junior year English, it was an assignment built into the end of the year as well. Now, whether or not students end up using that assignment as their essay is up to them. College Essay Day, yes, I forgot it because it was during Flex, so it was abbreviated. There was a College Essay Day as well where we had a panel of admissions reps up here giving tips and advice and answering questions as well. So we do urge students to share that with someone they're comfortable with. Sometimes sharing it with too many people can backfire because then they're getting too much feedback that might be conflicting. But many colleges also have supplemental questions, so you've probably heard of students working on these as well. And sometimes what happens, just to warn you, is that we've warned students all along the journey, is that sometimes you put so much focus on that main essay that you forget about those supplemental questions and just don't leave them until the last minute. Really make sure you're taking a look at them and starting to work on them sooner rather than later. We do share, as counselors, we share more in-depth tips about the essay in our Google Classroom. One of them really is to be yourself. Don't write what you think admissions reps want to hear. You really want the essay to tell the admissions committee something more about yourself than the information that's already provided in the general application. And proofread. We can't say that enough. The test optional landscape, of course, has changed since COVID. More and more colleges are test optional this year. You can get a complete list on the website fairtest.org. A fun fact we just learned last week when UMass Amherst was here, which was surprising, is that 70% of their applicants last year did not send test scores. And so previously the data that we've been getting across the board has mostly been 50-50. 50% of students are submitting scores, 50% are not. So this was pretty significant, hearing that 70% for UMass Amherst. Please be sure to check college websites for the individual policies, read all the fine print about their test test optional policies, because sometimes even though a college is test optional, it might not be test optional for a certain competitive major. And then always the question of when to send the scores. If the school is test optional, should I send my scores? Only when your scores are above average for that college is when we typically recommend you send them. And we do recommend waiting to get your results before sending. And when in doubt, if you are waiting for scores, you need to submit an application. Do not disclose them on the Common App. The admissions reps, they can't unsee them once they see them. So you can just not disclose them on the application. And if you need to send them later, you can send them later officially. So if college admission testing is required, students should try to have that done by January at the latest. So there's typically SATs the first Saturday of October, November, and December, and it takes roughly 2 weeks now. They're down to 2 weeks turnaround time for getting test scores back. You should see the SAT or the ACT website for updated test dates, locations, and cancellations. So it is up to students to go to the website and register themselves if they still wish to take a test. And that is how they would send their test scores as well, through their College Board or ACT account. There's a separate section to send the scores once they're able to see them after they've been reported. So again, if a student decides to send their test scores, it is the responsibility of the student to send them. Many colleges will allow you initially to report it unofficially on your application, and then they might require the official test scores from the testing agency later. But again, you do need to follow up and read all the fine print from each college. With the SAT versus ACT, for both of them, we do urge students to wait to see their scores. There is a price difference for each one. For SAT, it's $14 per school to send a score report, and then for ACT, it's up to $18.50 now. For SAT, you can send either all your test results, or you can do what they call score choice, which allows you to send scores from one test date. So you can't super score them yourself, but you either have the option of sending the whole score report or sending one date. With ACT, it's a little bit different. They report only the scores from the test date that you designate. So just a few things to keep in mind. Communicating with admissions should be student-driven for sure. They don't want to hear from parents. They want to hear from students. And I've actually sat with students in my office and called an admissions rep with them. I've had them do the talking, but kind of guided them and coached them along the way. Emails, if they email admissions, it should be well worded with proper greeting and signature. And honestly, I sat in for a few college rep visits last week, WPI, which was about 12 students, and Hofstra, which was smaller. And I really think going to those rep visit meetings really puts the students at ease. They realize these reps are on their side, and they're approachable, and they're their advocates. And so I think going to those meetings can be really helpful, and it sort of opens the student up. And they feel comfortable asking questions and reaching out. And many of the reps even hand out their own business cards as well. They really encourage students to reach out to them. And if a student is prepping for an interview, so this is not as common as it used to be. I feel like it's another thing that died with COVID, is interviews. But if a student does do an interview, they can see their counselor for some tips. And then after students apply, this is really important. It goes back to the tips about making sure that you check your email daily. And a lot of colleges are now just texting students updates about their application and saying that something might be missing. So we really urge students to stay on top of that. They are typically given login information to log into a portal to check the status of their application. And so they want to make sure that if something It can take up to 2 weeks, by the way, for them to update that, but they want to make sure that if anything goes missing for too long, they want to connect with us and make sure to resolve that as quickly as possible. And as I said before, quarter one grades and mid-year transcripts, both automatically sent via score. And then final transcripts are sent only to the college that the student ends up attending. And then once students have applied to colleges is generally when a lot of them turn their attention to scholarship applications. So there are scholarship application deadlines all throughout the year, but that's often, it seems to be a pattern with students where they get their college applications out of the way and then they are comfortable turning their attention to that. If a student is deferred or waitlisted, they can see one of us, they can see their counselor for advice on how to handle that and follow up. For college decisions, deposits are due by May 1st. So even if you apply early action, deposits are still due by May 1st, and you may not deposit to more than one college. We cannot send a final transcript to more than one college. That being said, wait lists, sometimes students might not find out they're off of a wait list until June or July. So in rare situations, a student might have to deposit and then they find out in June that they come off the wait list. This is rare, and then they have to make a difficult decision at that point. Other considerations, so these are things that won't impact everyone. If your student is an athlete and plans to play Division I or II sports in college, they do have to file with NCAA Clearinghouse and complete all the necessary courses. It's all outlined on the website, ncaaclearinghouse.com, bless you, and request a junior year transcript through the website. Students must earn at least a 2.3 GPA in their core courses here. And we are happy to report, as of last winter, NCAA permanently removed the SAT, ACT qualifying score requirement for first-year Division I and II athletes. But students should keep in mind that a college may still require their test scores for admission to the college. But in order for them to be eligible for Division I or II, that wouldn't be required. And then any students with disabilities, so any students on 504s, IEPs, colleges grant, those don't transition exactly. Like they're not going to honor the exact 504 or IEP that is in place and honor all of those accommodations. Colleges grant accommodations on a case-by-case basis, so it's really important to reach out to the college directly and meet with someone to discuss that and discuss what will be available. And oftentimes what the college is looking for is updated testing within the past 5 years. So that they don't necessarily even want the plan. The testing is what is more important if this applies to your student. And then as students applying to Mass State universities who submit documentation of a disability, they are eligible for exemption from the SAT or ACT, but always discuss admissions testing and college requirements with your counselor. They can help guide you with that. And then another separate consideration for some students might be a gap year, which is time intentionally taken after high school and before college. So some examples are volunteering in the US or abroad, a language immersion, work exchange programs, outward bound or semesters. We have links to a lot of these available programs, I believe on our website, but if not, this is something a student can absolutely come to us about, and we will help guide them on this as well. But even if a student is considering a gap year, we still strongly recommend that they apply to college if they really believe that they're going to just take 1 year and then go to college. And the reason for that is because they have our guidance right now, and they have our support to go through this application process. And so if they get it all done now, what they can do is, if they're admitted to a college that they want to attend, they can ask that college to be deferred for a year. And so then it takes that off their plate. They don't have to reapply. They can take their year off, do their gap year, and whatever plans they made, and then and attend college after that. And back to Mr. Adebato.
I can click it, it's no big deal. Thank you. Yeah, I'm good. Financial aid, that tends to be a pretty big topic going through this process. And so tonight is obviously about the college process for seniors. And we work with an organization called MIFA, which is a great organization we've worked with for a long, long time. And it's the Massachusetts Educational Financial Authority. And they have people that are willing to help parents. You can call in if you have quick questions, and they often come out to high schools to present on the financial aid process. And so we're lucky to have someone we've been working with for a number of years, Amy Staffier. She was here last June, for anyone that was here last spring, to hear about the financial aid process. She worked in the financial aid at Harvard for quite some time. Now she's at Simmons, but she'll be here on October 19th. So I would suggest that if you're able to, you could certainly attend that. That is, you know, again, it's very informational. You could come with questions, but it's more of a broad overview, and it gets into like the logistical details about some of the financial aid forms. And we put the website there for the MIFA events that happen throughout the year. A lot of them are virtual now. But I would suggest you check out that website, because they have a number of videos on there on all different topics that relate to financial aid. If you just wanted to hear about subsidized loans and unsubsidized loans, I believe they have a video for that. If you wanted other information on filling out the FAFSA step by step, they have information for that. And I think the Get One-to-One Help, I think that's an online virtual event as well. So you're going to hear about two big forms. One's the FAFSA form, and one is the CSS profile. The FAFSA just had some changes to it, but one of the changes is when it opens. It's not yet open this year. So for several years, it was October 15th when the FAFSA form opened up for parents and students to have the ability to start that process. It's now going to be, I don't think December 1st is confirmed. It's going to be sometime in December. We don't know the date yet. Yeah, the federal government rolls this out. This isn't our doing. But essentially, the FAFSA form is a form that you would fill out, and by filling this form out, the decision would be made whether or not students qualify for any state or federal financial aid. And that financial aid can look different ways depending on the college. So you could receive merit aid based on grades. You can also receive aid based on income. And so that aid could be grants and scholarships, which is what you would want, because that's the type of money you don't have to pay back. But there's also different types of loans that you would qualify for. Again, we're briefly going through this, so I think, again, our financial aid night, Amy will get a little bit more in depth. And then the CSS profile is and the FAFSA, again, it's the federal government. That's kind of that's who's reviewing it and giving this information, and the colleges are also have access to this information as well. The CSS profile is another form that you may come across depending on the college or university you're applying to. Not every college will require a CSS profile. This is mostly private schools that would require this, and it's looking at institutional funds of that particular college that students would qualify for. And I can tell you they ask, just from talking to parents and seeing it over the years, the CSS profile asks a lot more questions, gets a lot more in depth, whereas the FAFSA doesn't ask as many questions. And so the other piece to the CSS profile is you have to pay per school as well. Okay, so again, these are the two big financial aid forms that you're probably going to come across. So we really like parents to at least be aware of it. And you could certainly start to take a look at these documents as soon as possible. Again, if you're filling out a FAFSA, or if you filled out a FAFSA, it's last year's. So I would just make sure that you aren't filling anything out at this point. And then we don't list this, but many colleges have their own financial aid forms and processes. So you just need to be aware that some schools will have options for other financial aid applications. So you'd want to just be aware of that as you're doing the research and looking at the colleges. There may be an additional form they're going to ask you to fill out. So just be aware of that. Oh, no, that's fine. So local scholarships, we like to talk about this because this community is unbelievable over the years from what we've all seen in terms of giving out local scholarships. Last year, it was over $350,000 that were awarded to graduating seniors, Burlington High School seniors. All right? Now, that process is not one person or one committee deciding on all these scholarships. It's a combination of lots of groups within this community. Youth sport programs participate in the scholarship program. We have the Burlington Community Scholarship Foundation. That's a group in town that distributes quite a few scholarships. There's a tax checkoff scholarship committee. I don't know, when you get your tax bill, I don't know if you've ever contributed over the years, but there's a committee, that money goes into an account, essentially, and that money is geared specifically for scholarships of graduating seniors. So there's a committee there's an application and process for that scholarship. Mercedes-Benz has given scholarships over the years, lots of civic and fraternal organizations. I think in total there was around 140 different donors, lots of memorial scholarships, that type of thing. Those are all the local scholarships, and I think that's where parents can really help their seniors, because as Mrs. Leary said, when they get to that January, February, they're over the application process and they think they're in the free and clear until graduation. Then we roll this out, and the applications aren't necessarily extensive like a college application, but they are informational. Students do need to complete them, and so that's probably when they can use help with making sure they're meeting the deadlines. And it's usually right around February when the local scholarships become available. We do have scholarships available now on SCORE. They're more state and national scholarships, so those are available if you wanted to take a look. We found over the years that the national scholarships and even some of the state scholarships, the applications are very lengthy and cumbersome. So just be aware of that, and we don't have as many students apply to those or receive those. A lot of students will focus their efforts just on the local scholarships. MCAS. So I'm just thinking, these seniors, so was hybrid their freshman year for seniors? Hybrid was freshman year, okay. So MCAS has been a roller coaster ride with, when it was offered, when it's required. But just know for the current seniors, the MCAS test that was taken in their sophomore year, there is a MCAS award that is associated with depending on the scores with the student. So there are two different types of awards. And I also wanted to just be clear first, it's not a full ride. It's not a full scholarship, okay? What this award does is it waives the tuition at state schools only. So UMass Amherst, you've heard us talk about UMass Amherst in terms of competitiveness, but just in terms of what they charge, their room, board, and fees is probably, we'll say, around $30,000. The tuition is $1,700, all right? So just keep that in mind. Still, $1,700 times 4 over 4 years is a great savings. It's not what you probably want, but keep that in mind, all right? So it's the tuition. Now, if you go to a community college and you get one of these awards, that's great, because that's going to be a majority of that cost, all right? Excuse me. So the difference is, John and Abigail Adams, that's gonna be coming out soon for this senior class. That's simply the top 25% of MCAT scores in this class at Burlington High School. So the top 25% will receive something called an Adams Award. You would get a letter at home in the mail, and you would use that letter if you do go to a state school. You'd send that to the financial aid office, and the tuition comes off. All right, that's probably the one that is the one that's easier. The next one is called the Koplik Award. Koplik, you already know if you qualified because we mailed home information on this last spring. And if you're not sure, you can shoot me an email and I can check. Koplik means you achieved, and then the scoring categories have changed, but it used to be you needed to get advanced on one of the MCAS tests and at least proficient on the other two, because it's looking at math, English, and science. So it basically looks at your 3 MCAS scores and determines where your score is. It's not the top 25%. Again, it's based on your performance level on each test. And out of the three tests, one of the 3 has to be advanced and the other 2 have to be proficient. All right? I'm using the old scoring terminology, but I can certainly speak with a few of you after if you had further questions on it. But if you did receive this award, you would have got something in the mail last spring about the Koplik Award. So the Koplik Award, once you've met that qualifier of those scores, there's a second level of requirements, and that is either you need 2 academic activities in addition to achieving those scores. 2 additional academic activities. One, you could use 2 AP scores of a 3 or higher in 2 different subject areas. You can use SAT scores, depending on what you scored. You can also use a dual enrollment class and an AP score. You can mix and match some of these academic awards. So the application spells out some of the specifics. They'll also allow for 1 actual academic award within the school. If a student got any kind of academic certificate, they might count that as one of the 2 academic qualifiers. So again, after you meet the MCAS scores, you need 2 further things in order to get a Koplik Award. So I know it's a little confusing, and it's pretty detailed on the state's website, but I'd be more than happy to answer any questions at the end on those awards. But again, Adams recipients we don't have that information yet. The state hasn't given it to us. The Koplik, again, was last spring. Yes? Depends on the college. Whatever the tuition is at that state school would be waived. We just use UMass as an example. There's a $1,700. The other state schools could be very similar in terms of cost. The tuition, 100. It would be nice if it was. Right, it's broken down to, tuition, and then they have room, board, and fees. And then, should you pay someone to file a FAFSA to see if you qualify for scholarships? We'll leave that up to you, but we don't think you need to. You could certainly look into doing that. I think people try to sell guarantees, and it's not a guarantee. So we have had parents use services in the past in terms of assistance with FAFSA or the CSS Profile. That's certainly up to you to decide, but a lot of these forms and information and process can be done without having to pay someone, okay? Keep that in mind. Oh yeah, always use FAFSA.gov. I had a student one year use FAFSA.org. She went through a whole process and paid $80, and then come to find out, it's a free application. So what she did is she used a third party, filled out the information, and then they charged her and they submitted for her. So that is just something to be aware of. Actually, I don't know if this is in the new FAFSA, if this is going to be required anymore. Yeah, oh, okay, yeah, so this will be a part of the FAFSA form, would be just some questions around selective service. Okay. It might be linked to, oh, okay. So it's something to be aware of, the selective service. There might be some questions around that for 18-year-old males that are going through this, the financial aid process. And then how parents can help. So, you know, again, just keep in mind, I'm not going to necessarily read through every one of these, but if there are any restrictions, like, you know, you're not moving to California to go to college, but have that conversation now. All right? And so please just remember that. I have my children are all younger, but my brother has one that is just off to college, and that was a discussion they had up front. He wanted to go there, and I think my brother wanted him to stay, so. But again, don't limit choices based on sticker prices. A lot of colleges will say X amount of dollars to go, but if you dig a little deeper, it's not always that cost. The cost usually comes down. A lot of the colleges around here offer different types of scholarships or financial aid. We have great public universities in this state, but we also have probably one of the higher cost state schools in the country. So what I find is some of the private schools that are out there and schools in other states, the prices can be comparable. So keep that in mind. Deadlines, again, that's where parents can be a big help with deadlines. Let them make the decisions, or at least let them feel like they're making the decisions. I think that's an important piece. This is a good one, conversations. Keep in mind, seniors, everyone's asking them, what are you doing next year? What are you going to major in? Where are you going to go to college? They're getting it from all angles, not just at home, from family, from teachers, from us. So try to limit your conversations or find a time to discuss it, one time per week if that's feasible. But just keep that in mind, all right? Maybe you have a scheduled time, quick conversation about where students are with the process. You can give us a call. I've had a lot of conversations with parents over the years that are very surprised that we've had 3 or 4 meetings already with their son or daughter. So that can relieve stress for you. So please feel free to let us know. Give us a call anytime. And then Mrs. Leary pointed this out on one of the slides, but just make sure your son or daughter, make sure they're the ones making contact with colleges, emailing the colleges. It should be them, all right? It's time for them to take the lead on those types of things. And we talked about financial aid, and then, you know, we like to put that comment about be your child's cheerleader. We know you all do that, but, you know, a positive person to lean on during this process is definitely helpful. And then, again, you know, we know stress is part of life. That's the reality. But how students handle it, you know, coping strategies, sometimes it can be very difficult for students. So again, we're here to support in that realm as well, the counseling staff. But please know that if you do come across any situations where you think there's more going on, need additional support, we would ask you to please reach out to us. And then again, parents, we would just ask you, there's a couple documents there. I don't think the senior questionnaire, parent questionnaire was in there, Molly, right? Oh, this is all right. So if you could fill out tonight before you leave the evaluation, and then also the SCORE registration, if you'd like your own parental access to SCORE. The senior parent questionnaire, I think, if any counselors require that, you would probably email that out. Yes. They can certainly do that, but so I think it's good for parent. Well, number one, we track to see who's using We like to see student usage, parent usage. But as a parent, you can't alter or change anything, but you could go in on your own and conduct college searches. You can take a look at the colleges on your son or daughter's list. You can dig into that information as well. So it's access for you to see, what your son or daughter is seeing. Just like Aspen, I'm sure you have access there. Same idea. So, and SCORE is set up in that way that parents have access as well. And then, we don't do this as much because now we're using Parent Square, but in some cases, we might shoot an email to parents through SCORE. So if you're in there and registered, you'd get that email. All right. So that concludes the presentation, but we're more than willing to answer any questions. We covered a lot of information. But we would be, again, more than happy to answer any questions that anyone has at this point. And we'll stick around a little bit after if you had a more personalized question you didn't want to ask on BCAT. Yes? So it varies from college to college. Do you mean a college deadline? Yeah. So it varies from college to college, depending on when a student is applying. There are colleges that have October 15th deadline, November 1st, November 15th. So it depends on and also we talked a little bit about early action. So usually an early action deadline is right around mid-October. I think you were talking about the schools down south that were October 1st? October 15th. So the Clemson University is October 15th, but every college has a deadline depending on how you're applying, whether it be early action or early decision. And then the UCal schools are, because we had UC Davis here, is it October as well? It's an earlier deadline, isn't it? No? Yeah. Okay. So again, it's important to know your list, and then not just that, how you're applying. If it's early action, you definitely want to take a look at those deadlines. Yes? So some of the counselors ask parents to complete a questionnaire, and it helps to write a letter of recommendation. So you as a parent might have some insights that the counselor may or may not be aware of, so it can be a big help. Again, we consider that optional. Some of the counselors really do prefer parents to fill that out, Mrs. Leary being one of them. And so she would share that. Mrs. Leary, how would you go about sharing your senior parent questionnaire? Is that just through the you give it to seniors, your student? Okay. So once your son or daughter makes that request to Mrs. Leary, she would provide that questionnaire. Did you have a question? Yeah. That one, no. No. Correct. Yes. Accounts for you would be SCORE, FAFSA, and then I think that would be it. In the essay, it can be exported as like a PDF that can be printed out. And then a lot of students will paste their essay into the Common App. Just make sure you double check that, because but the characters are limited though. So in other words, if you write a 700-word essay and then paste it in, it's going to chop off 50 words. So you always want to make sure you're double checking that. Yes. The SATs? So if you know you want to submit them and you know where you're applying, you could send them whenever you want. It's really, you would go online, designate the college you want to send the scores to, and then the scores go electronically to that college. So, and then when we send our information, everything comes together on their end. But SATs actually can be sent at really any point in time. Some students like to wait till they get all the scores and send them all together. For example, if you were to send the scores now from last May, and then your daughter takes the SATs in October, that won't be an automatic. You'd have to then go in again and resend them. So oftentimes, students will wait until they've taken all the tests, and then keep in mind, colleges take the best scores from each subject area. So if you did better on the math in October than June, they just take the 2 highest scores. Not all. Nope, you just have to make sure there's about 2,000 right now. Fairtest.org has the list of all the colleges and universities that no longer require SATs. Yes? Yeah, so the question's about super scoring. That's what I just alluded to a little bit, where if a student took the SAT twice, they're just going to take, there's a math and an English, whenever the student scored highest, those are the scores that would be used as part of the admissions process. So that would be taking your highest scores. Students could indicate, I only want to send this test and that's it, if they've taken it twice. But we hear from colleges all the time, and they're going to take the highest scores. In fact, I think it was Holy Cross. They have software on their end that just automatically puts in the highest scores. So if you took the SATs 3 times, when those test scores get to the college, their systems on their end will take the highest scores. So super scoring, I don't think is something that colleges have told us make a big difference in the admissions process. Yes? It's the same. It's the same. That's why we tell students, if you got the Adams, just go with the Adams. And if you get both, you're not going to get double. So the Adams is the easier award. Of course, that's the one you want to receive. So if you don't receive the Adams award, you could certainly let us know. We could walk you through the Koplik process. But I would highly recommend waiting for that Adams release. So we usually have about 60 or so Adams recipients, and Koplik we probably have around 100. So there are going to be a number of students that I think the Koplik is designed just for those students that just missed the mark on the Adams. Should be coming out. Well, again, we're talking about the Department of Education, so it usually isn't in a timely manner. But in years past, it's been right around the middle of October, so coming soon. All right, like I said, we're going to stick around if anyone has further questions. But again, thank you so much for coming tonight. We appreciate it, and we look forward to working with you and your children this year. Thank you.